Pour the wine, Adrian Kane said, and every person in the room waited to see whether I was brave enough to tell the most feared man in Chicago no. The empty glass stood between us beneath the amber light of the chandeliers, its crystal rim catching the glow like a warning. My right hand held the unopened bottle. My left pressed the edge of a silver serving tray against my hip. Around me, 30 conversations quietly died. Even the violinist near the staircase missed a note. I had worked at the Marlowe for 11 months, long enough to recognize judges, real estate developers, state senators, and men whose watches cost more than my annual tuition. I had never seen a room change for anyone the way it changed for Adrian Kane. People did not greet him. They made space for him. The restaurant manager hurried ahead to pull out his chair. A local official abandoned his own table to shake Kane's hand. 2 security guards who usually inspected every guest suddenly found the floor fascinating. No one had introduced Adrian to me. No one needed to. His name lived in lowered voices and unfinished sentences. My younger brother once told me Kane owned half the city. I had corrected him. Men like Adrian Kane did not need to own every building. They owned the decisions made inside them. He sat at the center of the private dining room in a charcoal suit that looked simple until I noticed how perfectly it fit. His dark hair was combed back. His expression was calm. That was the unsettling part. Loud men wanted to be feared. Adrian Kane seemed accustomed to it. Across from him sat alderperson Daniel Mercer, smiling too widely as he slid a folder across the white tablecloth. I had been refilling water when I heard Mercer mention the West Haven redevelopment project. West Haven was where I lived. It was where my 17-year-old brother, Owen, attended high school, where Rosa Alvarez sold tamales from a cart every Saturday, and where half the apartment buildings needed repairs their landlords kept promising would happen next month. Mercer called the neighborhood underutilized property. He said the residents would be relocated. He said it as though 400 families were boxes that could be moved from one shelf to another. Adrian opened the folder without answering. His silence made Mercer nervous. I could tell because Mercer began talking faster. He promised tax incentives, private access, and a clean approval process. Then Rosa entered carrying a tray of appetizers. Rosa was 62, 5 feet tall, and stronger than anyone I knew. She worked 2 jobs and sent money to her daughter in Arizona. Her hands had begun trembling recently, although she insisted it was only too much coffee. As she leaned forward to place a plate near Mercer, the stem of his wine glass caught her sleeve. Red wine spilled across the front of his pale gray jacket. The sound he made was not loud, but it carried. Rosa froze. "I am so sorry, sir," she whispered. Mercer stood and stared at the stain as though she had ruined something sacred. Martin Cole, our manager, rushed into the room with a cloth and an apology prepared before he understood what had happened. Mercer did not take the cloth. He looked at Rosa. "Get down and clean it." For 1 second, no one moved. Rosa's face lost its color. Martin gave her a warning glance and lowered his voice. "Do what he says." My chest tightened. Rosa looked toward me, not asking for rescue, only trying not to be alone. I stepped forward before fear could become good sense. "The restaurant will have the jacket professionally cleaned," I said. Mercer turned toward me. "Did I speak to you?" "No, sir." "Then pour Mr. Kane's wine and stay out of this." Martin pressed the cloth into Rosa's hands. Her knees began to bend. I placed the bottle on the table. The base touched the polished wood with a soft click, but in that silent room, it sounded like a door locking. "She apologized," I said. Martin's eyes widened. "Claire." It was not my name anymore. It was a warning. Mercer gave a short laugh. "Your staff needs training." Adrian had not moved. He watched me with eyes so dark they appeared black in the low light. I could feel his attention taking in my worn shoes, my inexpensive uniform, and the small name tag pinned above my heart. Claire Morgan, 26 years old. Waitress. Graduate student on weekdays. Legal guardian too. A 17-year-old boy who ate cereal for dinner because I worked too many nights. A woman with exactly $83 in her checking account and no powerful friends. I should have lowered my eyes. I should have remembered the rent due Monday and the tuition payment already 2 weeks late. Instead, I looked directly at Adrian Kane. Mercer pointed toward the empty glass. "Pour the wine." I picked up the bottle, but I did not move toward him. "No." The word left my mouth quietly. That made it worse. Martin stopped breathing. Rosa clutched the cloth against her chest. One of Kane's men shifted near the doorway, but Adrian raised one finger, and the room became still again. "What did you say?" Mercer asked. I returned the bottle to the table. My hand was shaking, so I kept my palm flat against the tray. I said no. "You are refusing to serve this table?" "I am refusing to help you humiliate her." Mercer stared at me as though a chair had started speaking. "You have no idea who you are talking to." "I know exactly who I am talking to." I turned to Adrian. "That is why I am not pouring." His gaze remained on mine. He did not threaten me. He did not raise his voice. Somehow, that required more courage from me than anger would have. "Why?" he asked. One word. Controlled. Curious. I swallowed. "Because everyone in this room is watching you." Mercer scoffed, but Adrian silenced him with a glance. I continued. "If you allow him to make her kneel, they will remember it. They will believe cruelty is the price of sitting at your table. Perhaps that does not matter to you. It matters to the people who have to live under men like him." The violin had stopped completely. Beyond the glass windows, Chicago glittered beneath us, 40 floors of light and money separating the room from the streets Mercer planned to clear. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "What do you believe happens to people who refuse me?" My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "I believe everyone here already knows." That is why none of them said anything. For the first time, something changed in his expression. Not anger. Recognition. He looked at Rosa, who was still holding the cloth. Then, he looked at Mercer. Apologized to her. Mercer blinked. "Adrian, surely you do not expect me to do that." I was not asking. Mercer's face reddened. He muttered an apology without looking at Rosa. Adrian closed the folder and pushed it across the table. "The West Haven Agreement is suspended." Mercer stood rigid. "Over a waitress?" Adrian's eyes returned to me. "No, over what she noticed." 10 minutes later, his party was gone. The dining room filled with sound again, too loud and too cheerful, as though everyone wanted to pretend nothing had happened. Martin fired me before the elevator reached the lobby. He made me return my name tag, locker key, and employee access card. I folded my work apron into my canvas bag, collected my coat from the attendant, and walked into the cold November rain with $12 in tips and no plan for Monday. I had made it half a block when I felt something inside my coat pocket. It was a photograph, old and creased at the corners. My father stood in it, younger than I remembered, beside Adrian Kane. On the back, written in dark ink, were 7 words that stopped me beneath the streetlight. "Your father did not die in an accident." Rain blurred the handwriting until I pressed the photograph beneath my coat and ran back toward the Marlowe. A black sedan was still waiting at the curb. Its engine hummed beneath the storm, quiet and patient, as though Adrian had known I would return. The rear door opened before I touched the handle. A man in a dark overcoat stepped aside, but I did not get in. "Tell him to come out." The man studied me. "Mr. Kane does not usually meet people in the rain." "Then tonight can be educational." 5 seconds passed. Adrian emerged from the opposite side of the car. No umbrella. No impatience. Water gathered on the shoulders of his charcoal coat as he crossed the sidewalk and stopped 3 feet away. "You found the photograph." I held it between us. "Who put this in my pocket?" "I had one of my men place it in your coat while you were being dismissed." "You had 10 minutes inside that restaurant to speak to me. Daniel Mercer was watching you. So you placed a warning inside my life and waited to see whether I would chase you." His eyes lowered to the photograph. "I gave you a choice." "No. You gave me 7 words and a dead father." The rain ran down my face, cold enough to sting. Adrian looked toward the sedan. "Get in. I will explain." "Explain here." "Claire." The way he said my name was not a command. It was something quieter, almost regret. "Your father worked with Daniel Mercer." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "My father repaired elevators." That was the job listed on his tax returns. I saw him leave for work every morning. He did repair elevators. He also used the access that job gave him. The city seemed to fade around us. Cars hissed through wet streets. Somewhere behind me, a bus lowered with a metallic sigh. "Access to what?" I asked. "Financial offices. Private records. Meetings held after normal business hours." Adrian reached inside his coat slowly and removed a narrow envelope. He offered it to me. I did not take it. Thomas Morgan discovered that Mercer was buying property through shell companies before city redevelopment plans became public. Families were forced to leave. Investors connected to Mercer bought the buildings for almost nothing. Months later, The city approved projects that made the properties worth millions. West Haven. The unsigned agreement on the table. Rosa holding a cloth against her chest. My father appearing beside Adrian in a photograph I had never seen. You expect me to believe my father was investigating an alderperson? He was documenting him. For whom? Adrian's expression became still. For me. The answer landed harder than the rain. I stepped back. My father worked for you. Not in the way you think. I do not know what to think. The man everyone fears just told me my father had a secret life. Thomas came to me after Mercer threatened to close the maintenance company that employed him. Your father had copied enough records to recognize the pattern, but not enough to prove it. He wanted protection while he completed the file. My fingers tightened around the photograph. Did you protect him? Adrian did not answer immediately. That silence told me everything. You did not. I told him to stop. That was not my question. I arranged for him to leave Chicago with you and Owen. We never left. Thomas refused. He believed running would make Mercer suspicious. Adrian looked past me toward the restaurant windows, where warm light spilled across the sidewalk. I promised I would keep him safe until he completed the file. My throat closed. Then he died. Yes. The police said a truck crossed the center line. The report was changed before it reached the state investigators. I wanted to call him a liar. I wanted to tear the photograph in half and throw both pieces into the gutter. Instead, I studied my father's face. He looked tired in the picture, but he was smiling. Adrian stood beside him, younger and less controlled, one hand resting on the roof of an old blue sedan. Why were you with him? That photograph was taken outside a storage facility near the river. He had hidden copies of Mercer's records there. Where are they now? Missing. Convenient. Adrian accepted the accusation without flinching. I searched the unit after his death. Someone reached it first. Perhaps you did. The man beside the sedan moved, but Adrian raised one hand. The movement stopped. That is possible from where you are standing, Adrian said. You should consider it. His honesty unsettled me more than a denial would have. Why tell me now? Mercer recognized your last name tonight. I remembered the change in Mercer's face after Martin said my name. At the time, I thought he was angry about the wine. He knew who I was? Not immediately. Then he saw the name tag. You allowed me to walk outside alone. You were never alone. I looked across the street. A second dark car sat beneath a broken street lamp. You had me followed. Protected. Those are not the same thing. Tonight they are. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You do not get to turn my life into one of your guarded rooms. You do not get to make decisions for me because you failed to protect my father. Something moved behind Adrian's eyes. Paint, perhaps, or guilt polished smooth by years of hiding it. I do not need your forgiveness. Good. I need you alive long enough to learn what Thomas found. He handed me the envelope again. This time I took it. Inside was a photocopy of a page covered in my father's handwriting. Dates, property addresses, restaurant orders, numbers circled beside meals I remembered him cooking on Sundays. Chicken soup, apple pie, black coffee. It is a code, Adrian said. I believe you may understand it. I stared at the page. My father used recipes to help Owen learn fractions. Then, that is where we begin. Mercer has moved faster than I expected. The West Haven agreement proves he is still searching for whatever your father left behind. I folded the paper and returned it to the envelope. I will help decode this. That does not mean I trust you. Trust would make you careless. I am not staying in one of your houses. Claire, that is not negotiable. Adrian watched me for a long moment, then nodded. A car will remain near your building. Across the street. Fine. No one comes inside. Unless there is an immediate threat. No one comes inside. His jaw tightened. Fine. I walked away before he could change the terms. My apartment was 12 minutes away by train and 4 blocks from the station. By the time I reached the building, the rain had weakened to a mist. The hallway light on the 3rd floor was out. I unlocked my door and knew something was wrong before I stepped inside. The kitchen chair had been moved. Every cabinet stood open. Papers covered the floor. Owen's cereal boxes had been emptied across the counter. Nothing valuable was missing. The old television remained. My laptop sat untouched. Even the $83 in the coffee tin was still there. Then I saw the open closet and the empty hook behind the door. The spare Marlowe apron I kept for emergency shifts was gone. On the kitchen table, someone had left a single wine glass. Empty. The glass was still there when someone knocked 3 times, slow and measured, from the other side of the door. I did not move. My phone was already in my hand, Adrian's number glowing on the screen from the card he had placed inside the envelope. I had not called him. I had only entered the number. "Claire," he said through the door. "Open it." My breath caught. "How did you get here so fast?" "The driver across the street saw your lights come on. He also saw the fire escape window move." I looked toward the dark kitchen window. It stood open half an inch. Cold air slid through the gap. "You said no one would come inside." "I am still outside." "That is not comforting." "Call Owen." His name cut through everything else. I dialed my brother before Adrian finished speaking. Owen answered on the second ring, annoyed and half asleep. He was still at his friend Caleb's house, where he had gone to finish a history project. I told him not to leave. I told him I would explain later. My voice sounded calm. My hands did not. When I opened the door, Adrian stood alone in the hallway. His coat was wet, his hair darkened by the rain, and his eyes moved past me toward the overturned apartment. He did not enter until I stepped aside. That mattered more than I wanted it to. He studied the open drawers, scattered papers, missing apron, and empty glass. "Mercer's people," I said. "Possibly." "You sound uncertain." "Certainty makes people careless." I hated the way he said it, as though survival were a language only he spoke. "I am not leaving my home." Adrian picked up the wine glass with a clean handkerchief. "This apartment is not safe tonight. The glass is a message." Then I received it. "The person who left it wanted you to feel watched. We do not know what comes next." He did not describe anything further. He did not need to. "Owen stays with Caleb," I said. "No. Owen comes with us." "Us?" "A secured house near Lake Forest." "Absolutely not." Adrian set the glass down carefully. "You can argue with me after your brother is safe. I can argue with you here. Mercer knows your address, your job, and your brother's name. You may dislike my protection, but disliking it does not make the danger disappear." I wanted to refuse. Then my eyes fell on Owen's school photograph, face down beneath the kitchen chair. 10 minutes later, I packed 2 bags. Adrian's house stood behind iron gates nearly 30 miles north of downtown, surrounded by bare trees and enough silence to make every sound feel suspicious. It was not a mansion from a fairy tale. It was worse. It was tasteful. Gray stone. Warm windows. No visible cameras, although I counted 6 before we reached the front door. Owen arrived in a separate car, wearing Caleb's borrowed sweatshirt, and a look that shifted from fear to amazement when he saw the circular driveway. "You know Adrian Kane?" he whispered. "Not by choice." Adrian heard me. "The feeling is becoming mutual." Owen almost smiled. I did not. Inside, a woman named Evelyn Hart greeted us with hot tea and clean towels. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair pinned neatly behind her head and a voice that was gentle without being weak. Adrian asked whether the East rooms were ready. Evelyn said yes, then placed a hand on his sleeve. "You have not eaten." "Later." "That is what you said yesterday." Adrian looked at her for a moment, then sat at the kitchen island without argument. I watched the most feared man in Chicago accept a bowl of soup because a housekeeper told him to. It did not fit the version of him I had built. Neither did the framed photographs in the hallway. Adrian at a hospital fundraiser. Adrian standing beside a family outside a rebuilt grocery store. Adrian holding a scholarship certificate beside a young man in graduation robes. One photograph showed him sitting in a hospital bed with a charity board gathered around him. A card beside the bed carried the date March 17th. "Where was that taken?" I asked. Evelyn followed my eyes. "New York Presbyterian Hospital. He collapsed during a meeting in Manhattan and spent 6 days there. He tried to conduct business from the hospital until I took away his phone." She almost smiled. "He paid my daughter's medical bills years before that," she added. "I did not ask him to." "I did not ask about the bills." "No, you did not." Her eyes followed Adrian through the doorway. "That is his problem. He believes care only counts when no one sees it." I thought of Rosa beside Mercer's chair. Secret kindness does not erase public fear. "No," Evelyn said. "Perhaps it means fear is not all he has left." Adrian gave us rules after dinner. We were not to open exterior doors without security. We were not to share the address. Calls involving unknown numbers were to be routed through the security office. Owen listened. I did not. "You agreed to keep a car across the street," I said. "You did not agree to men entering your apartment." Neither of us invited the person who entered your apartment. So now I am a prisoner. You have access to every room in this house. A large cage is still a cage. Owen looked between us. Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. Decode your father's page. When we know what Mercer wants, you can decide what happens next. I took the envelope from my bag. I will leave when I decide. I heard you. We worked in the library until after midnight. My father's recipe notes appeared ordinary until Owen noticed that every circled number matched part of a street address. Chicken soup pointed to West Haven Avenue. Apple pie pointed to Fulton Street. Black coffee pointed to a warehouse district near the river. Each measurement corresponded to a parcel number, and each cooking time matched a transaction date. My father had hidden property records inside Sunday dinners. By 2 in the morning, we had mapped 11 purchases. Every property had passed through a different shell company. Every trail ended at the same parent corporation, Kane Holdings. The room became very quiet. Adrian stood across the table, one hand resting beside the map. You knew? I said. No, your company bought every property. Kane Holdings controls more than 400 subsidiaries. That is not an answer. It is the truth, although it is not an excuse. I searched his face for the control I had seen at the Marlowe. This time, I saw something else. Surprise. Or a convincing imitation of it. My father found your name, I said. Then he died. Owen whispered my name, but I was already gathering the copied pages. My phone lit on the table. The message came from an unknown number. If you found Kane Holdings, ask Adrian who approved the March 17th transfers. I have the originals. Shoreline Diner. 1 mile east of the gate. Come without Kane. I showed no one the screen. Adrian moved toward the door. Claire, do not leave. This house tonight. You do not get to order me to trust you. I am asking you not to walk into a trap. Perhaps the trap is standing in front of me. He stopped. The words reached him. I could see that. I requested a rideshare while Owen watched me with frightened eyes. Adrian could have ordered his guards to cancel it. Instead, he spoke into the house phone. When her car arrives, open the gate. No one follows unless she asks. I looked at him. Why? If I force you to stay, I become exactly what you believe I am. I left before courage could become doubt. The rideshare dropped me at Shoreline Diner, a 24-hour restaurant glowing beneath a white roadside sign. The parking lot was almost empty. A dark blue sedan waited beside the far curb. A man stood next to it beneath the cold light of a street lamp. I recognized him from Adrian's dinner table. Ethan Brooks, Adrian's closest friend. He opened the passenger door and looked at the papers beneath my coat. You found Kane Holdings, he said. Then you finally understand what Adrian did to your father. Ethan closed the passenger door after me and placed both hands on the steering wheel without starting the engine. Adrian will tell you I am betraying him, he said. That is how men like him survive. They make every truth sound like disloyalty. The diner lights washed the parking lot in a pale glow. Through the windshield, I could see my reflection layered over the empty road. Tired eyes. Wet hair. My father's papers pressed against my chest. Show me what you have. Ethan opened the center console and removed a leather folder. Inside were copies of property transfers, private messages, and approval forms bearing Adrian's signature. Kane Holdings appeared at the top of every page. My father's name appeared near the bottom of one document beneath the words external consultant. Thomas discovered Adrian was using Mercer to acquire land before redevelopment votes, Ethan said. When your father threatened to expose them, Adrian tried to bring him under control. Adrian said my father came to him for protection. Of course he did. Ethan gave me a look that felt almost sympathetic. A powerful man rarely admits when someone came to confront him. I studied the signatures. They appeared real. Strong lines. Precise angles. The same controlled confidence Adrian carried into every room. Why would Adrian show me the code if it led back to his own company? He did not believe you could solve it. He sat beside us while we worked. He needed to know how much your father had left behind. The explanation fit too easily. That frightened me. I remembered Adrian stepping aside at the library door. Perhaps he had known I would run. Perhaps giving me freedom had been another form of control. Ethan started the car. There is a fundraiser tomorrow night at the Halstead Museum. Mercer will be there. So will judges, developers, and every donor who helped bury the West Haven deals. We released the records in front of all of them. Why not give them directly to investigators? Mercer controls too many doors. Public attention is the only lock he cannot open. What happens to Adrian? Ethan looked through the windshield. He will have to choose between protecting his empire and protecting you. I should have heard the warning hidden inside that sentence. Instead, I heard justice. By noon the next day, I was in a hotel room reserved under Ethan's name, comparing my father's code with the documents he had given me. Owen called 6 times. I answered once and told him I was safe. He said Adrian had not slept. He is not angry, Owen whispered. That almost makes it worse. I told Owen to remain inside the estate and trust only Evelyn. Then I turned off my phone. The Halstead Museum stood beside the river, all white stone and glass, its entrance glowing beneath rows of winter lights. Ethan gave me a black server's uniform and a temporary identification badge. No one notices the staff, he said. He meant it as strategy. I felt the truth of it in my bones. For years, wealthy people had spoken in front of me as though a tray made me invisible. That night, invisibility would carry my father's evidence into the center of the city. The ballroom filled before 8. Mercer arrived smiling, his gray jacket replaced by a midnight blue tuxedo. He shook hands with donors and spoke about community renewal beneath a banner promising homes for Chicago families. I nearly laughed. Then Adrian entered. No announcement. No need. Conversations softened as he crossed the room. He wore black, and his expression was colder than I remembered. Ethan's empty place beside him was more noticeable than any accusation. His eyes moved across the servers until they found me. He stopped. For 1 second, the entire ballroom seemed to narrow into the distance between us. I expected anger. What I saw was relief. That made looking away harder. Ethan appeared near the service corridor and gave me a small nod. The plan was simple. At 9:15, the museum director would introduce Mercer. While the audience faced the stage, I would connect a small drive to the presentation computer. Every property record would appear behind him. Every donor would see. At 9:10, I carried champagne toward the front tables. Mercer stood near Adrian, speaking softly. The girl has become a liability, he said. Adrian did not touch his drink. Claire is not your concern. She became my concern when she interfered with West Haven. West Haven is finished. Mercer smiled. Nothing is finished until the paperwork disappears. I kept walking, my pulse beating in my throat. Near the stage, Ethan brushed past me and slipped the drive beneath my folded napkin. 5 minutes, he murmured. I reached the presentation station and pretended to rearrange water glasses. The technician stepped away to answer a question. My hand closed around the drive. The first document appeared on the small preview screen. The date was March 17th. The same date appeared on 3 approvals carrying Adrian's signature. A memory rose from Evelyn's hallway. Adrian in a hospital bed at New York Presbyterian. The dated card beside him. 6 days in Manhattan. I opened the document information panel. The author field read Ethan Brooks. A second file contained an internal transaction log. The approvals had been created through a Kane Holdings administrator account assigned to Ethan. The digital approval originated from the Chicago office while Adrian was hospitalized in New York. My fingers went cold. The signatures were not proof against Adrian. They were proof that someone had built a scheme beneath his name while he was gone. Connected, Ethan said behind me. His voice had lost its warmth. I turned slowly. You created these approvals. His smile did not change. Adrian signed whatever I placed in front of him. He was in New York. The account was yours. Then perhaps he trusted the wrong man. Around us, applause began as Mercer approached the stage. Ethan's hand settled over the drive in mine, not painful, but firm enough to make his intention clear. Connected. These files blame Adrian. They give the city the villain it already understands. You walk away. Your father could not accept that some truths require the right story. The room tilted. You knew my father. I knew he was stubborn. That was all he said, but it was enough. Ethan had not found me by accident. He had known the code, the storage unit, and exactly how to turn my grief toward Adrian. I looked across the ballroom. Adrian was watching us. 2 men working for Ethan stood between him and the presentation station. I could not call out without warning Ethan that I understood. Then I saw the champagne glass in Adrian's hand. Empty. The same kind of glass that had begun everything. I lifted the bottle as though I were returning to serve him. Ethan released my hand, satisfied. I crossed the room slowly, feeling every eye slide past me. Invisible again. safe inside the roll they had chosen for me. When I reached Adrian's table, I placed the bottle beside his glass, but did not pour. His gaze dropped to the empty crystal, then rose to my face. I told you once why I would not fill this, I whispered. Tonight, I need you to remember. Adrian looked past me toward Ethan. Something in his expression became perfectly still. Beneath the table, his thumb moved once across the screen of his phone. Then he pushed the empty glass toward the center of the table and stood. The room seemed to understand before I did that the rules had changed. Adrian did not look at Ethan first. He looked at me. Is the evidence real? He asked. The property records are real. Ethan used your administrator account while you were in New York. He copied your signature and built the transfers inside your name. Ethan gave a quiet laugh from beside the presentation computer. She has known this version of the truth for less than 5 minutes, Adrian. You should be careful which frightened stranger you trust. She stopped being a stranger when she warned me instead of protecting herself. Crystal moved across linen with a sound so small that it should not have mattered. Somehow, everyone heard it. Mercer remained beside the podium beneath the banner promising safe homes for Chicago families. His smile had disappeared. Donors lowered their drinks. A judge near the front removed a phone from his pocket. The people who had ignored me when I carried a tray were watching me because Adrian Kane was listening. Ethan stepped away from the computer. This is becoming embarrassing. Claire is grieving. She wants someone to blame for her father, and you have always preferred emotional loyalty to inconvenient facts. Then show everyone the facts, I said. His eyes met mine. The warmth he had used at the diner was gone. Connect the drive. No, you came here to expose corruption. I came because you told me Adrian caused my father's death. I told you his empire did. Adrian's expression did not change. Put the files on the screen. Mercer cleared his throat. Adrian, perhaps this conversation should continue privately. Privacy created this problem. Those are confidential business records. Then tonight they become evidence. Ethan looked toward the technician. Do not touch that computer. Adrian did not raise his voice. Display every file. The technician looked at the museum director. She looked at the phones already recording, then nodded. The screen behind Mercer changed. A map of West Haven appeared first. Red marks covered blocks where families had lived for generations. Then came purchase agreements, redevelopment schedules, private messages, and transfers moving through one company after another before ending at Kane Holdings. My father's coded recipe page appeared beside them. Chicken soup, apple pie, black coffee. The ordinary language of our Sunday kitchen had become a map of everything powerful men believed no one would find. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Mercer stepped away from the podium. Those documents have not been verified. The account records have, I said. The approvals were created through Ethan Brooks's credentials while Adrian was hospitalized in New York. Ethan folded his hands in front of him. Who controlled Kane Holdings when those purchases generated millions of dollars? No one answered. He turned toward Adrian. You may not have typed the documents, but your name opened the doors. Your reputation kept employees quiet. Your company accepted every profit. Are you going to pretend you were innocent? That was the dangerous part of his argument. It contained truth. Adrian had not designed the scheme, but he had built a world where questioning him felt impossible. The signatures were false. The fear was not. Adrian looked at the screen for a long moment. No, he said. Ethan blinked. No, what? I will not pretend. The room became completely still. Adrian faced the guests instead of Ethan. Those transactions were hidden from me, but they were completed through a system I created. People remained silent because my name taught them that silence was safer. I benefited from their fear. That responsibility is mine. Ethan's expression tightened. You cannot prove the archive is complete. When Claire left my house and you stopped answering your phone, I ordered an independent review of every West Haven transaction. My outside counsel prepared the archive before I entered this room. Adrian lifted his phone. Her warning told me whom to trust. 1 minute ago, I authorized the release. My breath caught. You sent everything? Everything my counsel recovered. The Illinois Attorney General, the City of Chicago Office of Inspector General, and 3 newspapers now have identical copies. Ethan stared at him. That archive contains your private agreements. Yes. Your political contacts. Yes. The board will remove you before sunrise. Then they should begin tonight. For the first time, Ethan lost control of his expression. You will destroy Kane Holdings. Adrian glanced at the screen, where his name appeared above another stolen building. A company protected by silence deserves to be dismantled. You will lose the city. A city that obeyed because it was afraid was never mine. Phones rose throughout the ballroom. Mercer whispered urgently to an attorney. Donors moved away from him as though distance could separate them from years of cooperation. The museum director spoke quietly with two investigators who had been waiting in the lobby at the request of Adrian's counsel. They approached the presentation station and asked that the computer and drive remain untouched. There were no dramatic commands, no public spectacle, only the steady collapse of certainty. Ethan looked at me. Ask Claire what she traded for this. Nothing, I said. You counted on my grief, making me obedient. My father disappointed you, so you thought I would be easier. Thomas was not brave. He was reckless. My hands tightened around the serving tray. You knew him. Ethan said nothing. You reached the storage unit before Adrian. You removed the records and left enough behind to control the story. Your father did not understand compromise. He understood theft. Something changed in Ethan's eyes. Not anger. Calculation. You should call your brother. The room tilted. I pulled out my phone and dialed Owen. No answer. I called again. The call went directly to voicemail. Adrian stepped closer to Ethan. Where is he? Owen received a message that appeared to come from Claire's phone. The message said she needed him. My mouth went dry. I never sent anything. A Kane Holdings vehicle arrived at the estate. Ethan continued. The gate approved it because the authorization came through my executive account. Adrian's face became motionless. You used my security system. You built a system that trusted titles more than questions. Ethan looked toward the drive. Stop the release. Withdraw the records. Give me the original files, and Owen returns safely. Adrian reached for his phone. Ethan shook his head. You cannot command this away. Choose carefully. Your empire or her family. I looked at Adrian and saw the choice waiting for him. He could close the ballroom, control the story, and negotiate in private. That was what the old Adrian would have done. He would have called it protection. He would have turned every person into a piece he could move. Do not choose me, I said. His eyes found mine. Choose the man you want to be after tonight. Adrian turned to the technician. Keep every file on the screen. Send copies to every verified address on the press list. Ethan's face hardened. Then you are abandoning the boy. No, I am refusing to let you hide behind him. Adrian spoke to the head of his security team. Notify the police. Give them every property, vehicle, access code, and account Ethan has used during the past 5 years. No private response. No favors. Everything goes through law enforcement. They will investigate you too, Ethan said. They should. Those words moved through the room more powerfully than any threat. Adrian was not demanding forgiveness. He was accepting consequence. My phone rang. Owen's name filled the screen. I answered before the first ring ended. His voice trembled, but he was safe. The driver had turned away from the highway, and Owen had realized the message was not for me. He told the driver he felt sick and needed to stop at a gas station. Because the driver had been instructed not to alarm him, the car stopped. Owen went inside, asked the clerk for help, and called the police. Officers were with him. I closed my eyes and listened to my brother breathe until my own lungs remembered how. When I looked up, the investigators were speaking with Ethan. Adrian stood alone beneath the screen, his empire dissolving in white letters behind him. I walked toward him. You believed me. I should have believed your father sooner. This will cost you everything. Not everything. His gaze rested on me for one quiet second. Then he took my father's photograph from his coat and placed it in my hand. I promised Thomas I would protect his family. I confused protection with control. What happens now? You go home with Owen. No guards. No conditions. No debt to me. For the first time since I met Adrian Kane, he did not tell me where to stand, what to believe, or how to remain safe. He stepped back and left the space between us open. The most powerful thing he did that night was not exposing Ethan, surrendering control of his company, or accepting an investigation. It was giving me a choice and refusing to reach for it. 1 year later, the empty wine glass sat in a display case near the entrance of the Marlowe. Beneath it, a small brass plaque carried 6 words. Dignity is never part of the bill. Rosa had chosen the sentence. I tried to argue that displaying an old glass in a restaurant was strange, but she reminded me that I had once challenged Adrian Kane in front of 30 powerful people, So my opinion about strange behavior had limited value. The Marlowe no longer belonged to a silent investment group. As part of the Kane Holdings restitution agreement, ownership had been transferred to an employee trust. Servers voted on schedules. Kitchen staff shared in the profits. Martin Cole resigned before the first employee board meeting. Rosa became Director of Employee Relations, a title she pretended to dislike, while correcting everyone who shortened it. I did not return as a waitress. Not exactly. 3 nights each week, I helped manage community events in the private dining room where Mercer had once ordered a woman to kneel. During the day, I served as Community Outreach Director for the Thomas Morgan Housing Justice Fund while finishing my graduate degree. We operated from 2 rented offices above a pharmacy in West Haven. Staff attorneys challenged illegal evictions and reviewed property records. I met with families, translated legal language into ordinary language, and taught tenants how to recognize documents designed to frighten them into silence. Owen designed our website during his first semester at the University of Illinois Chicago. He claimed the old version looked as though it had been built during the invention of electricity. I told him our father would have laughed. Saying those words no longer broke something inside me. It opened a window. Daniel Mercer resigned from office 3 weeks after the museum fundraiser. The investigations continued for months. Ethan Brooks entered an agreement to cooperate after the financial records matched my father's code and the internal account logs. Reporters called it one of the largest municipal property scandals Chicago had faced in years. I called it proof that my father had not spent his final months chasing shadows. Adrian gave testimony whenever he was asked. He did not hide behind private settlements, powerful attorneys, or the people who still owed him favors. Kane Holdings lost contracts, buildings, and most of its political influence. Adrian surrendered executive control and placed the remaining companies under an independent board. Assets connected to the property scheme funded compensation for displaced families and neighborhood businesses. Several newspapers described his fall. They were wrong. Falling was what happened when a person fought to remain above everyone else. Adrian had stepped down on purpose. It was not enough to erase the past. Nothing could do that. Regret without cost was only another performance, and Adrian had finally stopped performing. I saw him twice during that year. The first time was outside the courthouse after he testified. Cameras surrounded him, and he walked past me without stopping. He only nodded. He had promised me freedom, and he was honoring it, even when every part of me wanted to ask whether he was sleeping, eating, or still allowing Evelyn to order him into the kitchen for soup. The second time was at my father's grave. Adrian stood several feet away with his hands inside the pockets of his coat. He had left a small envelope beside the headstone. Inside was a letter and a certified copy of the recorded deed transferring the West Haven Community Center to the Housing Justice Fund without conditions. I called him that night. You cannot continue apologizing with buildings. I am running out of smaller ideas. Try words. The silence lasted so long that I checked whether the call had ended. I failed your father, he said. I benefited from a system I told myself I controlled. I believe protecting a few people excused frightening everyone else. It did not. No, I said. It did not. I am sorry, Claire. There was no request hidden inside the apology. No demand for forgiveness. I allowed the words to exist. Between us, imperfect and late, but honest. Thank you, I said. We did not speak again for 6 months. Then came the first anniversary of the fund. The Marlowe filled with teachers, tenants, small business owners, law students, and families who had once believed no one would listen to them. Owen gave a speech that was supposed to last 5 minutes and continued for 14. Rosa cried before he reached the second sentence. Near closing time, after the donors had left and the kitchen lights had dimmed, I looked through the front windows and saw Adrian standing beneath the awning. Snow rested lightly on the shoulders of his dark wool coat. He had no driver waiting at the curb, no men near the door. He was simply standing there, watching the room as though he was uncertain whether he had the right to enter. I walked outside. You have been standing here for 7 minutes. 9. Why did you not come inside? I was not invited. A year earlier, he would have opened the door and every conversation would have stopped. Now he waited in the snow because he had learned that access was not the same as welcome. I held the door open. Come inside. Adrian chose a small table near the kitchen instead of the private dining room. He removed his coat and folded it over the chair beside him. His suit was simpler than the ones I remembered. His face looked more tired, less protected, more human. I approached with a water pitcher and placed an empty glass on the table. His eyes moved from the glass to me. "What would you like?" I asked. "A conversation. We are having one." "Then coffee. That sounds safer. I am trying to improve." I poured water into the glass. The sound was soft and ordinary, almost lost beneath the kitchen staff laughing behind the swinging doors. Adrian watched the water rise. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "Because I chose to." He nodded slowly, as though those 4 words mattered more than any declaration he had ever received. I sat across from him after bringing 2 cups of coffee. For a while, we spoke about Owen's classes, Rose's new title, Evelyn's refusal to retire, and the grocery store Adrian had helped rebuild without attaching his name to it. Then the conversation became quiet. Not empty. Quiet. "There is a difference. I do not know what happens next," he said. "Neither do I. I used to hate that answer. What do you think now?" Adrian looked around the restaurant. Employees locked the doors together. The display case caught the warm light near the entrance. Beyond the windows, the city no longer lowered its voice when he entered a room. Now I think uncertainty might be another word for freedom. I wrapped both hands around my coffee. "That is almost wise. Do not tell anyone." I smiled, and something in his expression softened. He did not reach for my hand. He did not ask for promises. He waited. I placed my hand on the table between us, palm upward, and allowed him to take it. His grip was gentle, careful, nothing claimed, nothing owed. The city had once feared Adrian Kane because he could make people obey. I came to respect him only after he learned to accept no. He had ruled through silence for most of his life. But that night, sitting across from me beneath the warm lights of the Marlowe, he did something far more difficult. He listened. The first thing he ever truly earned from me was not loyalty, forgiveness, or love. It was a glass of water, freely given.